If you're new to this channel, you should know that I'm not a PokeTuber, and while I do watch Pokemon challenge runs from time to time, I don't really have it in me to pull off any of the more popular run ideas that the community has come up with. I couldn't deal with something as nerve-wracking as a Nuzlocke, and I don't have the patience to try a Professor Oak's challenge or solo the game with a joke Pokemon like Magikarp. But even so, I wanted to try to find some interesting way of approaching these games that I could enjoy. In thinking about that, it occurred to me that there's something of an untapped resource among challenge run concepts, that being trainer battles. And by that, I mean generic trainers just standing along the road, those kinds of battles. Most challenge runs either ignore these trainers, or they treat them as some kind of mildly annoying nuisance to be avoided whenever possible. And yet, the fact that all of them are optional in Scarlet and Violet got me to wondering just how many of these trainers are out in this big open world, and would they be able to give me enough experience to theoretically finish the game without needing to do any wild battles? That's an intriguing prospect, so let's do it. I'm going to be attempting to beat Pokemon Violet without getting into any wild battles. Obviously we'll have to make an exception for Titan Pokemon, plus there are a small number of required wild encounters, like Nemona forcing you into a battle with a Lechonk near the start, but aside from those, this looks like a pretty easy rule set to follow. Also in keeping with this idea, I've decided to ban myself from using items that increase experience, or EVs, to further emphasize the finite resource of trainer battles, and to underline that without wild battles, I essentially can't do any EV training and just have to take what the game gives me. Not using items in battle is another one of those things that challenge runners do, so let's see if I can stick to that as well. Now, in keeping with the spirit of no wild battles, the logical next step would be to make this run into a starter solo. The problem with that, however, is how do I pick just one of these guys? Skeledirge shares a type combination with one of my favorite Pokemon, and the other two have final forms inspired by Carnival. I'm from New Orleans, how could I pass those up? As such, I came up with what is surely a reasonable and not at all absurd solution. Why don't I just do all of them? Make 3 separate Switch profiles and do 3 simultaneous runs so I can see how each of the starters fares under this rule set. It's a bit more work, but I think it's doable. Most of the early game is pretty unremarkable, although the second battle with Nemona could present a slight challenge for some of the starters. I did go off the beaten path to battle a few extra trainers in Area 1, allowing me to enter this battle at level 12, at which point all of the starters 2-hit KO both of Nemona's Pokemon. But Quaxley can take a fair bit of damage from Palmy's Terastallized Thundershock, while Fuecoco is notably slower than the other two, and so has to be able to survive more hits. Then there's a pair of unremarkable battles setting up Team Star, as well as the terastallizing concept, and after a bunch of story setup at the Academy that was absolutely riveting to sit through 3 times, we finally get to go exploring. I chose to go west into Area 2, where the starters reach their first evolutions after fighting the local trainers. Originally, I was thinking that each of the starters would tackle the game's major battles in an order that suited them. But this early evolution, combined with the Aerial Ace TM awarded here, which both Florigato and Quaxwell can learn, gave me the thought that perhaps I could try to have them all go after the 18 badges in the same order. My hunch paid off well. Quaxwell easily swept Katie with Aerial Ace while taking almost no damage, just as easily as Crocolore with Incinerate, although it had the bad fortune to face her in the rain, which turned her Tarountula and Teddiursa into 2-hit KOs. Even Florigato with its bug weakness performed well here thanks to Aerial Ace, surviving Bug Bite and Terastallized Fury Cutter to claim its first big victory. At this point, there are a bunch of level-appropriate options for where to go next, with Areas 3, 4, and 5 of the South Province all having trainers in the teens and low 20s. After clearing all of them out and gaining 10 levels in the process, I felt ready to go after the first Titan. Cloth was unsurprisingly a joke for both Florigato and Quaxwell, 1 and 2-hit KOing its first and second phases respectively with their new stab moves Seed Bomb and Aqua Cutter. Crocolore's at a type disadvantage, but but thanks to the Dig TM, which you can find in a nearby canyon, it was able to take down the first phase in 2 hits and the second in 3, with some help from Arven's Shelter. I followed this up immediately with a trip to Artazon, where as part of the gym test you have to battle 2 Sunflora that don't technically count as wild battles because you can't catch them. Brassius himself was fairly similar to Katie, with Quaxwell skirting around the grass weakness with Aerial Ace, Florigato scoring an easy win with the even stronger U-turn as a level-up move, and Crocolore doing the same with Incinerate because for some reason Sudowoodo preferred to use Trailblaze on it instead of Rock Throw, even though it still didn't outspeed Crocolore after the speed boost. The next major battles are back in the west, but unfortunately the trainers in Area 1 of the West Province aren't any stronger than those I've been fighting in the last section, leaving me to gain just 2 levels from this massive zone. That could kind of matter for the Titan Bombardier. Well, not for Quaxwell because Aqua Cutter decimates it, and not so much for Crocolore either, despite Bombardier having Rock Throw. Its attacks are just too random, and in the case of Rock Throw, too inaccurate to really feel threatening. Florigato, however, had to face a substantial threat of both Wing Attack and Pluck while not having a better attacking option than U-turn, because Bombardier is also a Dark type. It didn't help either that this is the only Titan that doesn't have a pause between the first and second phases where I could heal, so I'm glad that I got some luck with regard to its choice of attacks and what Arven's Knackley decided to do. Next up came the first Team Starbase, and it was here that I realized I'd need to have at least 3 Pokémon to even get inside. After going back to the start to pick up some low-level Lechonks, I entered the Star Barrage, which was still very doable even when I effectively only had 1 Pokémon. Giacomo, on the other hand, was a mixed bag. Crocolore instantly incinerated Pawniard, and then tanked the Starmobile's Wicked Torques while gradually wearing it down, and only had to worry about the chance that Wicked Torque would put it to sleep. Quaxwell performed much the same with Low Sweep, although the Starmobile's Intimidate was annoying. On the plus side, though, after 3 Low Sweeps, Quaxwell was actually outspeeding, giving it a bit of an edge. As with Bombardier, though, Florigato was in a rough spot, particularly because while it has U-turn to hit Dark-type super effectively, I couldn't use it here because the game would force me to bring out one of the Lechonks. Instead, for the first time in any of these runs, I had to Terrastalize to get more damage on Seed Bomb, as well as equip the Clear Amulet earned from defeating trainers in the area to avoid Intimidate. It was close in the end, but the Starmobile pushing Florigato into Overgrow range turned Seed Bomb into a 3-hit KO and allowed it to narrowly claim victory. That was rough, and considering what the next Team Starboss specializes in, it left me pretty nervous. So nervous, in fact, that I opted to clear out areas 1, 2, and 3 of the East Province before taking on any more major battles, giving the starters enough experience to reach their final forms. That said, though, not all the battles in this next segment are cause for concern. The Nemona battle in Levincia is an absolute joke at level 38, with all of the starters one-shotting her entire team and Quaquaval outspeeding Crocolore even after it got paralyzed off Palmy's static. Iono didn't put up much of a fight either. Meowscarada obliterated all of her Pokémon with either Night Slash or Flower Trick. Skeledirge managed the same with Torch Song, although it still had to worry about Mismagius outspeeding and using either Confused Ray or Hex. And even Quaquaval with its type disadvantage did very well, with Aqua Step 1 or 2-hit KOing all of her Pokémon while it withstood their attacks. Mela, meanwhile, was the real problem here. Skeledirge, oddly enough, fared the best, and I took advantage of her Torkoal's drought to 2-hit KO it with Torch Song while boosting Skeledirge's special attack, allowing Shadow Ball to do the same to a very non-threatening Starmobile. Quaquaval has an obvious advantage. The combination of the sun weakening water moves, as well as the threat of a burn which it suffered on the very first attack, slowed things down quite a bit. It survived to knock out the Starmobile only thanks to it using Screech twice and also missing twice with Overheat, so safe to say it got a mixture of good and bad luck in that battle. I know you must be wondering about Miascarada, and, well, the good news is that it can learn Power Gem via TM found in the quarry north of Levincia, which one-shots Torkoal and takes out the Starmobile in 3 hits. The bad news is that, as fast as Miascarada is, the Starmobile is even faster, and it can easily 2-hit KO with Blazing Torque. I got very lucky with it using Screech and another Overheat miss. Can you believe there's only a 10% chance of that happening? Whatever, a win's a win, and it's not like I was looking forward to over-leveling even more if that hadn't been enough. The Titan Orthworm made for a quick and easy palate cleanser after Mela. Skeledirge one-shot both of its phases with Torch Song, even outspeeding, while Quaquaval got to show off its new stab Brick Break, another TM found in the East Province. Miascarada could have used Brick Break too, but it was hardly necessary with Stab Night Slash dealing respectable neutral damage and Orthworm doing very little in return. Following a very silly delivery quest that gave me an excuse to beat out a desert's worth of trainers, it was time for the next gym. Kofu is a rare chance for Miascarada to shine above the other two, with Flower Trick utterly decimating his team. With Quaquaval, I opted to try out the TM for Bulk Up, as Kofu's lead Veluza doesn't know any psychic moves, making it easy setup fodder. Just one boost was enough to 1 or 2-shot his Pokémon with either Acrobatics, another useful TM, or Brick Break. Skeledirge has a free KO with Shadow Ball on Veluza because of its secondary type, but after that it was stuck using Thunder Fang against the other two. Wugtrio was faster, and Crabrawler just barely survived 2 hits, and it came down to a lucky bout of full paralysis. Although, considering this is the Water-type gym leader we're talking about here, it could have been a lot worse. The next badge, however, is from another team's Star Boss, and with as much as Miascarada in particular struggled against the first two, and knowing his type specialty, I opted to clear out areas 2 and 3 of the West Province, as well as the lower section of Glaciado Mountain below the snow line, getting the starters up to level 49. Now, Skeledirge had no trouble whatsoever with Atticus thanks to it learning Earthquake via TM from fighting trainers in the desert. It easily knocks out everything, and even has a handy poison resistance thanks to its ghost typing, which is one of those obscure type matchups that I tend to forget about. Quaquaval lacks a resistance or a super effective move, but after one bulk up, Liquidation ran through Atticus's team and even defeated the Starmobile 1 turn faster than Skeledirge did. Miascarada, though, yikes. Not only is it weak to poison, but it just doesn't have any way of hitting Atticus's Pokémon very hard. I got to be a little clever in defeating him, though, relearning Hone Claws to boost Miascarada's attack, and equipping a Pecha Berry to remove Skunktank's Toxic. After 2 boosts, Acrobatics 1-hit KO'd Skunktank as well as Muck, and Night Slash did the same to Revavroom. And the Starmobile was a 2-hit KO with Acrobatics, although it was a very close match that I might have lost had Noxious Torque poisoned. Team Star just does not like the Sprigatito line, I swear. As overleveled as I was now, Larry didn't put up much of a fight, especially when 2 of the starters have advantages against normal types. Quaquaval straight up one-shot his entire team with Brick Break. Skeledirge did the same with Torch Song and only got hit with the weaker of Staraptor's 2 attacks, and even Miascarada scored an easy KO with Flower Trick against Kamala. Dudunsparce survived and paralyzed it with Glare, but even with that it still outsped Staraptor and one-shot it with Flower Trick. There's another Nemona fight immediately following this gym battle, but frankly it was unremarkable except for Skeledirge, as the other 2 easily wipe out her team with their stab moves. Skeledirge, however, is outsped by Lycanroc and got flinched by a super effective bite, and because it again had the bad fortune to face this battle in the rain, its Torch Song missed the 1-hit KO on Miascarada. You can see how little damage Terrastalize's Flower Trick did to it, however. On to the mountain proper now. I fought the remaining trainers up there, and picked up the TM for U-Turn, which Quaquaval will really appreciate for an upcoming battle. If you're wondering why I keep mentioning when I find these TMs out in the world, it's because a side effect of not fighting any wild battles is that I have almost no resources for crafting TMs. I think that's kind of neat, actually, both because it makes TMs feel a bit more like they are in the older games, and because between looking for TMs and hunting down trainers to battle, I feel like I'm being rewarded for exploring the world even though I'm not battling or catching any wild Pokemon. Anyway, the next gym leader is a double battle, which is always awkward in solo runs, although fortunately I already had a Lechonk from the Star Barrage to serve as a placeholder. The strategy here turned out to be the same for all three starters. Focus on knocking out all of Rhyme's Pokemon except Mimikyu, which is fairly weak with only Slash and Shadow Sneak. The other three were all one-hit KO'd by Night Slash, Shadow Ball, or Liquidation, in part thanks to the crowd buffing my offense. And taking out her Toxicity quickly has the useful side effect of preventing the crowd from buffing the stats of all of her Pokemon. It was a fairly close battle for Skeledirge, as it had to tank multiple Shadow Sneaks and even one Sucker Punch from Bayonet, but in the end, all three prevailed without much trouble. The same could be said for the battle against the Titan Iron Treads in the desert, including the fact that Skeledirge fared the worst, as it faces super effective hits from Knockoff and Stomping Tantrum here. Worth noting that this is one of the only battles to differ depending on which game you're playing, as in Scarlet you face the fighting ground-type Great Tusk instead. Just looking at its type and moveset, I'd wager that in Scarlet, Quaquaval would fare just as well, Meowscarada would have a quicker knockout thanks to Flower Trick being super effective, and Skeledirge would have an even rougher time as Great Tusk isn't weak to fire, but still has the same two dangerous moves. It's a pretty balanced comparison, all things considered. Continuing southward, it was finally time to venture to Alfornada, where Nemona was waiting for another battle. This was another trivial exercise for Meowscarada and Quaquaval, but Skeledirge struggled again with another round of bad luck battling her in the rain. Lycanroc outspeeding was also a big problem, this time thanks to Sand Attack, and Sligoo's rain-boosted Water Pulse didn't help matters either. If Team Star is Meowscarada's nemesis, the RNG that determines the in-game weather is clearly taking on that role for Skeledirge. Following this is Tulip, the Psychic Gym leader, and as might be expected, she's kind of a joke for two of the starters. Meowscarada easily sweeps with Night Slash, and while her lead, Fragiraf, prevents Skeledirge from doing the same with Shadow Ball, that just gave me an excuse to set up Torch Song boost while it set up Reflect for some reason. After that, Shadow Ball runs through Tulip's team, although Espathra outspeeds and hits back with its own Shadow Ball. As for Quaquaval, U-Turn allows it to sidestep its Psychic weakness and one-hit KO everything except her Terastallized Flourish, which countered very hard with Moonblast but went down the turn after. There's nothing else now between me and the 8th gym, so it's time at last to tackle my favorite type, which sadly was pretty easy as it typically is. Nothing on Grusha's team can stand up to Quaquaval's new Close Combat or Skeledirge's self-boosting Torch Song, not even Satitan with its Thick Fat or Terastallized Altaria with its all-around bulk. Meowscarada, meanwhile, is in a lot more danger, and I had to put some thought into what it would take to one-shot each of Grusha's Pokemon. Frostmoth was an easy one with acrobatics, but Beartic and Satitan required me to teach Meowscarada Low Kick, which hit them both for max damage due to how heavy they are. Altaria, on the other hand, is too light for Low Kick to do much, but it still fell to 2 Flower Tricks, while Meowscarada was able to survive 1 Hurricane in return. With that, we've got all 8 gym badges, and Quaquaval also got the TM for Ice Spinner as the obligatory ice coverage that all water starters get. Still, we've got 1 Titan and 2 Team Star bosses left, and as you might imagine, I was concerned about Team Star in particular, so I finished up fighting just about every generic trainer in Paldea, getting the starters up to level 67 for Ortega. Skeledirge gets another relatively easy win once it gets past Azumarill and its Aqua Tail, as Seed Bomb and Torch Song take it out, allowing Dachshund to fall to Shadow Ball, Wigglytuff to another Torch Song, and the Starmobile to 2 of them, while Skeledirge can withstand their hits thanks in part to its fairy resistance. Quaquaval has an easy opportunity to use Bulk Up on a Azumarill, provided it has the Clear Amulet to block Ortega having a bunch of ways to lower your attack, and after that, Acrobatics and Liquidation clear out his team. Weird, though, that the Starmobile likes to use Steel Roller, which is not only resisted by Quaquaval, but also removes the misty terrain that its ability sets up. Moving on, Meowscarada handled all of Ortega's regular Pokémon with Flower Trick, also bringing in the Clear Amulet to block Dachshund's Baby Doll Eyes. But the Starmobile was a 5-hit KO, while Meowscarada is weak to Fairy. It even got hit with Confused Ray, but I got very lucky, and it never hit itself in confusion, and just barely survived all of those super effective magical torques. Terastallizing to remove the Fairy weakness would have made this safer, but I'm trying to hold off on that, you know? Even though it's the Dragon Titan, Tatsugiri is more water-themed, which naturally led to it being a cakewalk for Meowscarada and Quaquaval. The latter took longer, having to rely on close combat on two very bulky Pokémon, but it's not like they could do much back. On the flip side, Skeledirge has to rely on Shadow Ball as it does more than the Seed Bomb TM, even to the Mono Water Dondozo. It took around 5 Shadow Balls to take out Tatsugiri itself, even with help from Arven's Greedent, but luckily it likes to waste turns using Taunt instead of attacking. Beating this Titan unlocks the ability to climb walls, allowing me to defeat a few more trainers scattered around the map and pick up the Earth Power TM for Skeledirge. That just leaves Airy, the Fighting-type Team Star Boss. You'd think that Skeledirge would fare best here, but Quaquaval outperformed it by using Bulk Up on Toxicroak and then one-shotting everything before the Starmobile with either Acrobatics or Liquidation. The Starmobile itself took 2 hits, but it only used Shift Gear for some reason. Skeledirge wasn't too much worse, but the problem is that almost everything here outspeeds, and they all have super effective coverage to hit Ghost types. For this, I came up with an odd but effective solution. Flame Charge. Flame Charge is physical and has low base power, but it gives Skeledirge the boost it needs to outspeed Ares' Pokémon and then take them out with the stacking damage of Torch Song. Only the Starmobile survived a hit, but as with Quaquaval, it only ever used Shift Gear. With Quaquaval, that may have been a fluke, but now I'm wondering if her Starmobile can even hit Ghost types. Meowscarada had to Terastallize here to remove its fighting weakness, but aside from that, the battle went pretty smoothly, with Acrobatics taking out Toxicroak right away to avoid Poison Jab, and then using Passimian as setup fodder for Hone Claws. Acrobatics is a clean sweep from there, except for the Starmobile, but as a mono grass type, Meowscarada can survive a combat torque. With Airy defeated, Team Star is finally done. Well, mostly. There's 10 more battles left in the game, and now that I'm pretty sure I've fought every trainer in Paldea, I'm a little worried. See, I'm at level 68, and by looking ahead, I can see that that's just barely higher than the final boss's team. I'll gain a few more levels in the battles in between, but with as much as certain recent fights have given me trouble, I think it's time to do some serious endgame prep. Scarlet and Violet are different from older games in that it's much easier to change your Pokemon's nature and max out their IVs through hypertraining, as you can hypertrain starting at level 50, and the mints and bottle caps needed for those can all be bought with Poke-Euros, or whatever we're calling them. I'm still not using any experience boosting items or altering my EVs from the random assortment I got from trainer battles, but I figured IVs and natures were fair game. For those curious, Meowscarada was minus speed plus defense, which is ridiculous considering how few things outsped it and how frail it still was. I opted to keep the negative speed and shift the positive over to attack instead. Skeledirge was plus special attack minus speed, which was not surprising, but as it needs its attack for some coverage moves, but also has a serious problem with getting outsped, I switched it to plus attack minus defense, as its defense is naturally higher than its special defense. Quaquaval was more straightforward. taking a fairly unremarkable plus speed minus special defense nature and pumping it up with plus attack and minus special attack. I figured that if it ran into speed problems now, I could just switch back to using Aqua Step. The next question then would be where to start with Endgame. The Elite Four have slightly lower levels than the other options, so they make the most sense to challenge first. With these guys, I think it'd be more interesting to narrate each starter's progress individually, rather than breaking up each battle like I've been doing. Better mirrors the experience of fighting the Elite Four and all that. So let's start this final exam with Meowscarada. Rika is a simple warm-up, with Flower Trick one-shotting all of her Pokémon. Donphan will survive on 1 HP thanks to Sturdy, but its Poison Jab can't do all that much, and even if Meowscarada gets poisoned and Clodsire tries to protect Stall, this is still quite easy. Poppy, though? This was a rough battle, particularly on account of her Corviknight, and I had to try several strategies until I landed on a reliable one. Meowscarada can use the low kick strategy from the Grusha battle to deal with Caparaja, but Corviknight takes almost no damage from low kick and also has Brave Bird. With the Muscle Band equipped to boost physical moves, Night Slash 2-hit KOs it, but it does a ton of damage, and the battle's not exactly over after it faints. I ended up having to use Rest of all things to restore HP on the Magnezone Poppy sends out next, but because its Flash Cannon is a 3-hit KO on Meowscarada, I also had to teach Sleep Talk and hope that it would pick a damaging move. Either works as Magnezone has Sturdy, so after waking up, Meowscarada can finish it off and then knock out Bronzong with Night Slash and Tinkaton with Low Kick, which is also where the Muscle Band came into play to ensure the KO. That sounds fairly easy, but I'm leaving out how many failed attempts I had working with other strategies ranging from setting up on Caparaja to using Fling with a rare bone for more damage on Corviknight. Mild spoiler alert, Poppy's Corviknight is the single biggest hurdle in the Elite Four for Meowscarada, as while it's not completely smooth sailing after this, it does get more straightforward. You'd think that Larry would pose a serious challenge now that he's using flying types, but his lead Tropius is easy to set up on, as its air slashes are weak, and it likes to set up Sunny Day for basically no reason. I equipped the Clear Amulet to block Staraptor's Intimidate and set up 2 Hone Claws on Tropius, after which Night Slash one-shots everything Larry has. Now with the Muscle Band again, Hassel went about the same, as Meowscarada can set up Hone Claws on Noivern while it likes to use Super Fang, and from there, Night Slash handles Dragalge while Play Rough deals with everything else. Interesting to note that Hone Claws' accuracy buff is actually relevant here, as it removes Play Rough's 10% chance to miss. That leaves top champion Jita, who's fairly easy with the right coverage. No setup or held item needed, just Night Slash, Flower Trick, Low Kick, and Acrobatics to crush her team. Only Avalugg can stand up to a single hit, and while it does a lot with Body Press, it's not enough to stop Meowscarada from claiming my first of 3 champion titles. It's Skeledirge's turn now, and unlike with Meowscarada, the first battle in the Elite Four can present some problems. The only guaranteed knockouts against Rika are Whiscash with Seed Bomb and Camerupt with Earth Power, as Donphan will survive with Sturdy, and Dugtrio outspeeds and likes to set up Sandstorm, which can cause Seed Bomb to miss due to Sand Veil. In the successful battle, I ended up getting a crit on Clodsire, and I really can't tell if it mattered. On the other hand, Skeledirge runs through the next 2 members with ease. Everything Poppy has is weak to fire, which means Torch Song boost galore. She'll send out Magnezone second to last, and though it'll survive to set up Light Screen, after 5 boosts, not even that's enough to save Tinkaton from getting roasted. Larry is similar, courtesy of weak lead Tropius getting blasted with Torch Song and setting up an easy sweep. Skeledirge will need to switch to Shadow Ball for Altaria, but that's it really. Hassel is the real threat here, particularly because some of his Pokémon outspeed Skeledirge. For that, I brought back a strategy from the Airy fight, opening with Flame Charge for a speed boost, and then following it up with what's already become a popular item to pair with Skeledirge, Throat Spray. Not on Torch Song in this case, though, but rather on Disarming Voice, which has very low base power, but is still just about the best tool Skeledirge has for dragon types. After those boosts, Shadow Ball is enough to score some KOs, but they still won't be enough for his ace Baxcalibur. I had one more trick up my sleeve, though, taking advantage of Glaive Rush's side effect of causing the target to take double damage the following turn to endure the hit with, well, endure, and then using Shadow Ball afterwards to finish it off. As with Meowscarada, the Jita battle is all about type coverage. Her lead, Espathra, outspeeds and hits hard with Lumina Crash, but every single member of her team instantly falls to one of Shadow Ball, Torch Song, or Earth Power. That's league win number 2. Finally, we come to Quaquaval. Rika is fairly easy, although Quaquaval does need to set up on Whiscash to deal with her ace. Donphan's Earthquake and Whiscash's Future Sight deal a fair bit of damage, but one bulk up is enough to sweep with the combination of Liquidation and Close Combat. Surprisingly, Poppy was nearly as challenging for Quaquaval as for Meowscarada, once again due to Corviknight hitting extremely hard with Brave Bird and being hard to KO in one hit. I came up with the idea to equip the Shell Bell and set up on Caparaja. One bulk up turns everything into a one-shot, even Corviknight with Close Combat, and the healing from the Shell Bell restores the damage lost from Caparaja's Play Rough for the unlikely event that Magnezone goes for Discharge instead of Light Screen, which it still did for some reason. Larry was a cinch, just like with the other two. Tropius is just way too easy to set up on, and Quaquaval has Ice Spinner to obliterate his flying types. Couldn't forget the Clear Amulet, though, to block Intimidate. Ice Spinner is equally helpful against Hassel, now with the Muscle Band to boost its damage, but it's a messier victory, as Noivern outspeeds and leads with Super Fang. There's not much opportunity for Quaquaval to set up, and I had to wait until I reached his second-to-last Pokémon, Haxorus, to get in a bulk up that was crucial for knocking out Baxcalibur. As you probably figured out by now, Jita is not much of a top champion, although Quaquaval struggled against her more than the other two. Her first 3 Pokémon fall to U-Turn, Acrobatics, and Close Combat respectively, and after that, Quaquaval can sneak in a bulk up to ensure that U-Turn and Close Combat finish the job on the rest of her team. To be fair to Jita, of course, that's not quite the end of the Victory Road arc. The last story battle against Nemona plays a bit similarly to the previous ones, with Meowscarada and Quaquaval having a fairly easy time as they can set up on her lead Lycanroc and claim victory with the right coverage, which in this case includes Play Rough or Ice Spinner for Goodra, as well as Low Kick on Meowscarada so it can deal with Orthworm. As for Skeledirge, Lycanroc outspeeds and can do a lot of damage, and it's not the only Pokemon on her team that can outspeed either. The best way to deal with that was again to open with Flame Charge for a speed boost, then take out Lycanroc with Earth Power. Orthworm's up next and was easy fodder for Torch Song, but Goodra's a nightmare here as it's bulky and can hit Skeledirge hard. I ended up using Outrage here as it's a clean one-hit KO, although being locked into the move for Dunsparce is kind of annoying, as is having to equip a Persim Berry to clear confusion afterward. After that, however, Torch Song and Earth Power clean up, and while Skeledirge needed a bit of luck with either Lycanroc missing with Stone Edge or only getting a 2-turn Outrage, I'd say that overall that battle could have been a lot worse. It could have been raining. After the Nemona fight, the game spawns you inside your dorm room, which forced me to fight Clavel next just so I could leave the building. Wasn't really planning to do him next, but sure, why not? His Oranguru is a real nuisance with Yawn and Reflect, but it's easy to set up on, and the eventual sleep can be blocked with a Chesto Berry. Skeledirge needs the least setup, only a Flame Charge speed boost and 2 Torch Song boosts over the course of the fight to sweep through Clavel's team, including Earth Power to take care of Houndoom, and Shadow Ball to knock out Poltegeist and his Quaquaval. My own Quaquaval needed 2 bulk ups to account for the 1 attack boost removed by Gyarados' Intimidate, and I exchanged Close Combat for Brick Break just in case Oranguru set up Reflect, but Brick Break plus Liquidation plus Ice Spinner for Gyarados and Meowscarada scored the win. Odd though that his Meowscarada went for Shadow Claw instead of a super effective Terastallized Flower Trick, but after 2 defense boosts from Bulk Up, Quaquaval could probably have survived that anyway. As for my Meowscarada, the poor thing needed a total of 5 Hone Claws boosts to ensure a knockout on Skeledirge, which isn't weak to Dark after it terastallizes and is obviously a massive threat. Most of those it got against Gyarados, as its best move against Meowscarada is the not terribly strong and famously prone to missing Stone Edge, and after all the necessary setup, Meowscarada was able to claim victory with its stab moves plus acrobatics for Abomasnow and Amoonguss. The following battle against Penny's Evolution team offered some sweet revenge for Meowscarada for all the trouble Team Star caused it during this run, as her lead Umbreon is so weak that it's free to set up 3 Hone Claws, which is enough to take everything she has with Flower Trick and Night Slash. All Meowscarada needs to pull off the sweep is the Clear Amulet to block Baby Doll Eyes, which every single one of Penny's Pokémon have. The same is true for Quaquaval, although it only needs 1 bulk up to win with its stab attacks and Ice Spinner. Jolteon did outspeed, which worried me, but Thunder ended up missing, so it was fine. If I'd wanted to avoid that, I could have just used Aqua Step in place of Liquidation and set up another bulk up on Umbreon to make up for the lower base power. Skeledirge can set up a whopping 3 boosts on Umbreon with Torch Song and the Throat Spray, then lead with Flame Charge on Vaporeon to ensure that it would outspeed Jolteon. Sure, Hydro Pump hurts, but Shadow Ball takes it out, and from there it's just a matter of getting 2 more Torch Song boosts off of Jolteon and Leafeon to guarantee a one-hit KO on Sylveon and spare Skeledirge a hit from its Shadow Ball. It's kind of funny that even though Starfall Street is pretty much the hardest of the 3 story arcs, the big boss of Team Star is one of the easiest endgame battles. Granted, Arven's not much better, and this was a pretty simple battle all around, thanks, again, to another lead Pokémon that's easy to set up on. The worst thing Greedent can do is paralyze with Body Slam, something it will only even attempt on Meowscarada. And while the 2 physical starters can't block Mabostis Intimidate with the Clear Amulet because they need the full damage of Acrobatics for Arven's grass types, it's really nothing they can't handle. Skeledirge's fight here may take the prize, however, for the easiest endgame fight of all. No items, no setup turns, doesn't even need 2 of its moves, just Earth Power for Garganacl and Torch Song for everything else. I'd be embarrassed for Arven, but then not being that great at battling is kind of part of his character. We're just about at the finish line now. Area 0 has 6 mandatory multi-battles against wild Pokémon, and after fighting them, the starters were entering the final fight at level 74, so around 8 levels ahead of Turo's team. By the way, this is another battle that changes depending on the version, with Professor Sada in Scarlet having an entirely different set of Paradox Pokémon. Unlike with Iron Treads and Great Tusk, there's too many variables at play here for me to try to figure out how each of the starters would handle the opposite version equivalent of this fight, so I'm just going to stick with what I've got here in Violet. Anyway, at this point I've done pretty much everything I can do within the parameters I've set for these runs to prepare for this encounter, so all that's left to do is carry it out. Turo leads with just about the worst Pokémon possible for Meowscarada, the Fire Poison Iron Moth, which it struggles to one-shot, and which can just about one-shot Meowscarada with Sludge Wave. There's no way I could set up on this thing, and to even knock it out reliably, I had to bring back a strategy I tried out for the Poppy battle, that being the move Fling, a one-time use dark attack that changes its base power based on your held item. With a rare bone, which actually aren't that rare as I had 12 of them just lying around in my bag, Fling has 100 base power, which is just enough to knock out Iron Moth. Iron Jugulus is next, and while its Air Slash is also very dangerous, Meowscarada can take it just well enough to set up a Hone Claws and then take it out with Play Rough. Iron Bundle falls quickly to Flower Trick after that, but then I was stuck. Iron Hands is bulky enough to survive a Play Rough even at +1 attack, and like literally every other one of Turo's Pokemon, it can hit Meowscarada super effectively. Well, I've been trying to hold off, but Meowscarada's had to Terrastalize before, and it's not like there'd be a better time to do it than during the final battle, so let's do it. With the extra boost from Terrastalization, Flower Trick one-shots his 3 remaining Pokemon, none of which resist grass, thankfully. Skeledirge, by contrast, very much appreciates Turo leading with Iron Moth. It outspeeds, but both its stabs are resisted, leaving it to attack with a weak Discharge instead. One Flame Charge gets Skeledirge outspeeding everything, and one Earth Power destroys Iron Moth, as well as the follow-up Iron Thorns, which is also doubly weak to ground. Iron Jugulus is very threatening with its powerful Dark Pulse, but it's now outsped thanks to the speed boost, and Torch Song 2-hit KOs it, setting up the usual Skeledirge sweep. Iron Bundle, gone. Iron Hands, gone. Iron Valiant, one final performance of Torch Song puts it down for the count. Take a bow, Skeledirge, you earned it. Quaquaval has a deceptively easy start to this battle, outspeeding Iron Moth and easily knocking it out with a water move. But it doesn't take much to guess that this battle is going to take a little more effort than that. Bulk Up on Iron Moth ensures some KOs later on, and crucially adds to Quaquaval's defense. Relearning Aqua Step gives it an equally crucial speed boost that allows it to outrun the Iron Bundle that Turo sends out next and destroy it with Brick Break. And having the Shell Bell equipped helps keep Quaquaval's HP high throughout the fight. As generally embarrassing as it would be to lose to a variation of Delibird, it naturally outspeeds Quaquaval and also has Freeze Dry, so it has to go. Unfortunately, Iron Hands is a 2-hit KO no matter what, but with Bulk Up, Quaquaval can tank its Thunder Punch and put it down with 2 Aqua Steps. Iron Jugulus is outsped and 1-hit KO'd by Ice Spinner, only possible by boosting, and Iron Thorns easily falls to Aqua Step. That just leaves Iron Valiant, which can just barely endure Aqua Step, but Quaquaval took its Psycho Cut like the fabulously flamboyant champ that it is and finished it off. While that's not quite enough to reach the credits, all that's left is a mostly scripted battle where you have to use the box legendary, so I think I can call it here. Wow, I didn't know I had it in me, but I just beat 3 solo runs of Pokemon Violet without fighting any optional wild battles, and only relying on trainers for experience. Didn't use items in battle, never resorted to any luck-based strategies like Double Team, only ever Terrastalized 3 times with Meowscarada and not at all with the other 2, which makes sense considering Grass is the weakest of the starter types, especially in a solo context. Huh, I kind of feel like an actual challenge runner now. I guess challenge runs of Pokemon aren't so bad provided I can do them on my own weird terms. Speaking of which, I did keep track of exactly how many trainers I fought in these runs. The total came up to 319, which funnily enough is about 20 battles shy of the total number of trainers in Pokemon Red and Blue. I think that speaks to both how overstuffed the older games were with trainers, and also to how relatively few of them there are in the vast open world of Paldea. Pursuing that idea a little further, I've thought about testing out this challenge concept in other generations, and if this video does well, and you guys seem to like that idea, I'd be happy to give it a go. Like the video and subscribe to my channel if you're interested, and tell me your thoughts in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and thanks especially to my patrons for helping to keep me motivated to experiment with different types of content like this. Au revoir!